All right, so here we go. Hey, thumbs up. Okay, cool. All right, here we go, my holy, wonderful friends. We're up to part 7 of this lovely series, 7 out of 7, about the different Sefirat, and we've been speaking about really taking the concepts of the Sefirat and seeing how they play out in our lives, in our relationships, in our psychology, in our emotions. And this Sefira that we're discussing today is kind of the flip side, the connection, the second side of the coin of what we spoke about last week. Last week we spoke about healthy relationship versus unhealthy relationship, healthy relationship versus entanglement. And so to this week we're going to speak about the concept of MALCHUT. The concept of MALCHUT gets into the idea of vulnerability. I guess we could give a quick rundown about why that is so. If we start a little bit higher up, a little bit more in the spiritual realms, the idea of Malchut, of course, first and foremost, means kingship. So what do we mean by kingship, right? In particular, the whole concept, the whole bigger picture in the spiritual side of things, of the Sefirot, is the way, the system that God used in order to create the world. And of course, this whole world is created for the purpose of revealing Hashem, revealing godliness, even here in this world in which it seems not so clear that there's God, right? Look around the world, I see a table, I see a chair, I see me, I see you, I see all sorts of things, but do you see the infinite one source of which we are all a part and an aspect of? Not at first glance. So, nevertheless, the idea of revealing kingship is to be able to reveal God clarity and consciousness and reveal that really Hashem is at the core of everything going on, even in this space, even in this world where at first it seems that Hashem is not all that clear. And that takes us moving out of the way. That takes us making a space. That takes us being strong enough to be able to exist here, yet know that we're really in the hands of Hashem, even when we're involved in doing, right? Which is, of course, the dichotomy and kind of the spiritual schizophrenia of the Jew, right? Which is, on the one hand, we're supposed to be involved in, we're supposed to know that it's all God. On the other hand, we're supposed to actually take action. And as we're taking action, know that really the results are in Hashem's hands. And really we're taking action because there's an idea not to rely on miracles, and that we're supposed to be involved in this world, but also with the consciousness of beyond this world and knowing that Hashem is running the show, even as we're involved in the nitty-gritty of daily life. And so there's a certain level of vulnerability there, right? Shabbat is a great example of this concept of Malchut. Shabbat means, one of the ideas of Shabbat is we're here in this world, yet we're acknowledging that really all of this physical world is really Hashem at its core, right? There's a certain vulnerability there. Also, in particular, the idea is that the culmination, so to speak, the high point and the ultimate goal in a certain respect of this world is when we are revealing Hashem in this world as fully as possible. And that is when we have the Beit HaMikdash at the center of this world, when we have the temple at the center of this world. And so that's the idea of Malchut, right? The idea of Malchut is when we go ahead and do what we can to really open the space for the revelation of Hashem in this world. And so there's a lot more to be said about that, but the point that I wanted to bring about is to then take it to the next level and see that in our own lives and recognize the importance, if we want to build connection, if we want to build relationship, the importance of vulnerability and how vulnerability is at the source of it. And that's funny because vulnerability gets a very bad rap. If you were to play a word game with someone and you were to walk out to your average Joe on the street or your average Jane on the street, and you were to ask him or her, just gut response, let's play a word game. First word that comes to mind when you say the word vulnerability or vulnerable, first word that comes to mind for most people is weak or weakness, right? And the truth is so far from that. The truth is so far from that, as we're going to explain and go into now. The truth is that vulnerability is the biggest strength. is the biggest strength. Right? Think about two different people who go on a date, right? Imagine you have like scenario number one, gal and guy go out on a date, and imagine one of them is the entire time, concerned about what the other one is going to think about them, right? They're concerned about like how they're going to look at them. Oh, let me make sure that I don't say this and I won't say that because they might take it in this wrong way, and they're going to be, and so they start kind of like holding themselves back because they're afraid what the other person is going to think, and they're afraid like, oh, they might, not be interested in me, and so because of this, they're not vulnerable. Would you say that they're being strong in this situation? Right? No. You'd probably say that that's a sign of weakness, right? Like what about, let's take scenario number two. Person goes out on the date and decides that like they're going to be totally authentic on the date and be real because, yeah, it's true, the person might walk away. Yeah, if I show them my quirky side, they might not be interested, or that might be, not for them. But like, alternatively, what's the point of the date if not to find out if I like them and if they like me, right? So what am I going to do? Hide who I am so that they might like me, so that I don't turn them away. Like, so a person who goes ahead and steps into being real and being authentic and saying, yeah, you're right, they might walk away, but I'm going to be who I am, and that's okay. And and I'm going to put the ball, I'm going to be my authentic self, and then the ball is in their court if that's something that they're interested or not. A person who steps into that is making themselves vulnerable. Would you say that that's a strong move, though, or a weak move? Right? Clearly, that's a move of strength. That's a movement. That's a move of recognizing a certain reality in the big picture and wanting to be authentic with themselves and how they live and be dignified person of integrity. And all of that then dictates acting in a state of realness, which means vulnerability, because it means that you're putting your real self out there, and the other person could say, no thanks. The other person can turn away. The other person could slam a door in your face. Right? And so many people are so afraid of that, right? They're so afraid of that. But the point here is to recognize a couple of things. Number one, if they walk away from you, better that happened now than hiding things for a while and it happening later. That's number one. Number two, and more importantly, and more at the core of things, is when we internalize the reality that there is no such thing as a relationship without vulnerability, then it's going to be a lot easier to start peeling the layers off and becoming a little bit more vulnerable. And with practice, becoming extremely vulnerable, right? Because that's what people don't get. They think they're going to cut a corner. They think like, oh, I can not be real here. I cannot be real there. I can hide this thing. To the extent you are not vulnerable, to that extent, you're undermining relationship. You're making it so that the relationship is a non-starter. Why do I say that? Because like I mentioned before, relationship means that you put your real self out there, and then the other person has a choice. Is this something that they want to grow with and incorporate and build with or not? If you don't do that, or if they don't do that, of course it goes both ways, then that meeting isn't happening. You're stuck here, and you send, some kind of half version of yourself. You send your representative, as Chris Rock famously says. You send your mask, right? But then there's ongoing, on the more authentic place within ourselves, there's an inner knowledge that we both have that we're not, our inner selves are not connecting. And so after a while, you start to feel, I'm not feeling it with this person, on an inner level. It could be on an outer level. You're like, you can turn in a certain way and your hair blows and all that stuff. That could be for a certain extent, for a certain amount of time, for a certain level of depth. Not that much, but the seder, that's also needed, don't get me wrong. But when it comes to actually connecting and building a real relationship with the person on an internal level, on a meaningful level, so if that's not happening, so after a while, the person you're with, either you looking at them or them looking at you or both, right, is like, I'm not feeling anything over here, you know? And so that's the thing. Control undermines relationship. Control is the opposite of relationship, right? Control is the opposite of vulnerability, right? Because you're trying to control what the other person is thinking, right? You're trying to control what the other person is going to react to you when you're not being vulnerable, right? And of course, that's rooted in your own fear. That's rooted in fear of rejection, right? That's rooted in insecurities, right? What if I show them my real self and they don't want that, right? So the higher person, the person with the higher approach, the higher side of yourself, when you're operating from a place of self-worth, of self-esteem, and also hopefully with confidence as well, the answer to that is, that's okay. I'm glad we found that out now. On to the next one. Maybe that person will be interested in me and I'll be interested in them too. That's called healthy. It shouldn't, if there's such a damage and such a oof, and if it's so painful and defeating when a person says thanks, no thanks, when they see who you really are, then there's some trauma there from your own self, right? Because I think we should, for the most part, be in a place where it could tinge a little bit. We could be disappointed, especially if we liked them and we connected and we thought it was going to be good. We can have there could be a certain level of pain that comes along with it, sure. But to be completely defeated and like, oh my God, what if they don't like me? As if that's going to be the end of the world and the end of your existence. That's coming from a place within us that needs to be healed. That's coming from a place of trauma. By the way, anytime you find that anyone reacts, you yourself or anybody else you know, reacts over the top to something, even if they were wronged, but if they act like, you know, way over the top versus like the person did the wrong about this amount of wrong and they act like way over the top. So that's a sign that you touched on a place of trauma, right? We've spoken about that before. So we have to recognize, right, that this inability or the resistance, let's say it like that, to really put our true selves out there, to really just say, okay, listen, I'm going to be real, and if let the chips fall where they may, all of that is coming from fear, right? And the bigger point is that you undermine the relationship before it has the opportunity to even get off the ground, right? And by the way, you're also going to be not living a fulfilling life yourself, right? When you're not able to say your piece, right? Say your piece doesn't mean like, yeah, fight the power. You know, I got to say my piece and fight. It's not what we're talking about here, right? We're just talking about being real to who you are in your Dalet Amot, as we say in Judaism, in your 4 cubits, and you're being real to yourself. Like we spoke about when we talked about the Midah of Netzach a couple of weeks ago, that there's an aspect where we are supposed to be assertive, when it's healthy to be assertive, when it comes to things that have to do with us, our domain, our decision. So it's the same thing. Part of vulnerability means to put our authentic selves out there. And then, yes, we are not trying to take the control away from the other person. We're not saying, oh my gosh, what if they reject me? And then therefore trying to hide who we are or frame things in a certain way so that they don't reject you. Can you hear the idea that you're taking the opportunity for you to be chosen away from that other person? Right? But so many times we rather do that if it means that we think somehow it's going to be less likely that they'll walk away, right? But you hear the idea that even if that person doesn't walk away, and even if they do choose you, still the lower side of yourself is satisfied because it's pacified and you didn't get rejected. The higher side of yourself, though, is not satisfied because you know in your unconscious, or maybe even in your conscious, that that person didn't 100% choose you because you didn't 100% put yourself out there to potentially be chosen because you're afraid of what if they don't choose you. And so to the extent we're inauthentic, it's to that extent there is no relationship, right? You can be hanging out together. You can even build an attachment with one another. But that real sense of emotional intimacy, it's not happening, right? Because if there's no vulnerability, if there's no authentic self that is being shared, then if that's being held back, then the connection isn't happening, right? And so we need to become strong enough to be vulnerable, strong enough to be open, right? And so sometimes it might need, you go on a date or something, a glass of wine, as a little, not a wheelchair, but a little crutch, hopefully. Glass of wine could be helpful, especially at the beginning. It's not the worst thing in the world, right? I'd love to, say, okay, trauma therapy, is also good, but little quick help, that could be good. Take the edge off a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. Keep it healthy, of course. There's inappropriate extremes for these things. But the idea is to be open, right? Because when we are open, and we're unguarded, so then the real you comes out. The real feelings come out, and real feelings can be developed. And that's when relationship happens. That's when connectivity happens, right? It also means for those singles who are out there, it means throwing away a lot of that checklist, right? Now, there are limitations to that also. It doesn't mean anything goes, right? If you're a Jew on here, right? Gotta date a Jew. That eliminates, 99.9% of people on planet Earth. So there are, There are, there are certain things that we're not gonna, of course, get rid of. But the point is, there are deal breakers. Thank you very much for the right word. But where those deal breakers are, I think there are people who push things to be way more specific than they need to be, especially by the ladies, by the way. Especially by the ladies, I think people, by the guys, the guys are more connected to that concept. Kabbalistically, spiritually, are more connected to the concept of direction, the word in Hebrew is surah, frame. That's the male concept, whereas the female concept is the concept of HaOmer, which means material. It means, again, rooted in this idea of vulnerability. But that means unguarded, right? And of course, we all need both of these. We all have a male side and a female side, for sure. That's true. But anyway, the point is to be able to go into the situation and go into the relationship and say, and see how I am in the moment. Also, that's another way that people are trying to be controlling, and it's really fear-based as well, which is being attached to the end goal of the situation, right? A lot of people go into a date, right? And it's first date, and they're thinking, is this my husband? Is this my wife? And while of course we want to be marriage-minded, for sure, not taking anything away from that, but that's in the bigger picture. The bigger picture is I'm dating for a purpose and it's marriage-minded. But in the moment, as I step into that date, it's got to be from a place of vulnerability. Vulnerability means I'm staying in the moment. I'm present in the moment. And the moment is that I'm going out on a date with this person. I'm going to relax, be real, enjoy, have a nice time. And then I'm just going to ask myself one question after that date's over. And that is, would I like to see him again? Would I like to see her again? Not is it possible this could be my husband? Not, is it possible, is this person my wife? No, stay in the moment, stay present, stay vulnerable, right? Because again, see, there you go, masculine, feminine. Masculine, again, there's the frame, there's a direction we're moving in. But in the moment, we need to stay in that vulnerable to the situation that is. Step into that situation. See, that's the thing. A lot of people, we spoke about this by Hod, the idea of the idea of how we deal with disharmony, right? And we spoke about a lot of times people want to end disharmony. So they want to get to the end of the story, right? There was actually a song about it. How'd that go? Wake me up when it's all over. Right? What was that? That was someone who can't handle the journey, right? And so he wants to get to the end, right? But the whole point is, no, stay present, right? So anytime you're in a journey, you have these people who are like, God forbid, they take a test, and maybe they might be a person could be terminally ill. They take a test. They have to sit there and wait, though, for the results 5 days, right? And they said that those are the 5 longest days, right? And so there are people who the feeling will come up for them. The feeling will come up for them is like, I don't even care. They might say that they don't mind if it's a positive result. They'd rather a positive result than not knowing, right? That's a lack of vulnerability, and that's a lack of being present in the moment, right? Our role in life is, yes, to have a vision and a direction. That is also true, but also to be in the moment. So many people want that, it's got to be Mashiach right now, right? And people had this situation with the corona. It's like, well, it's, okay, Mashiach must be around the corner because corona, right? Because of course, a bunch of spoiled Westerners. It's just like, well, I mean, I'm uncomfortable. Like, what could it be? It must be that Mashiach's coming because I'm uncomfortable for the first time in history, And so then there are people, when you make that association and you make that, just like the Gemara says, by the way, Gemara said it 2,000 years ago. Don't try to set the date of when Mashiach is supposed to be, right? That's a no. You're not supposed to do that. All right. Are we supposed to yearn for Mashiach? Sure. Are we supposed to also, though, be present in the reality of the moment that is? Also, yes. Right? Also, yes. Imagine if whoa, Shabbos, that's the goal of the week. And then you start observing the Sabbath on Tuesday. Right? So you think you're holy. There's nothing holy about that. There's nothing holy about that. Right? Because we're supposed to be present in the moment. Matter of fact, it's not allowed. Not allowed to try to keep Shabbat when it's not Shabbat. The idea is to be present in the moment, and that takes a vulnerability, right? That takes authenticity. And so getting back to the relationship theme, right? So many people are so, guarded because they don't want to be hurt or they don't want to be let down, that, we put up these emotional walls, perhaps due to past experiences or what have you, but then those emotional walls become our solitary confinement, right? And so what we need to do is to drop our defensiveness in the face of fragility, right? To drop our defensiveness in the face of fragility. And that means overriding your emotional survival instincts, because surviving as an independent, surviving as a single is killing and undermining your couplehood, right? And so many times these walls or these fears of rejection or whatever, and when you're involved in a relationship, come out in anger instead of vulnerability, right? Because we're overcompensating, because we don't want to be real, because we're afraid of being rejected there, right? So what do I mean? Imagine a person upsets you in the relationship. Imagine you're in a relationship with some guy, gal, whatever it might be, and the person does something that you don't like. The person does something that's painful to you, okay? So a lot of times people will react with, let's say, anger, okay? They blow up or what have you, right? What is the goal of that really? If we were really getting the person's subconscious and unconscious, so you could say, okay, they saw programming, this is what they do. That's true. The goal of it, of course, really, though, is to get the person, you think somewhere along the way you've learned that if I yell and go crazy, the other person will be manipulated into not doing that thing that upsets me. Right? Change, or they'll see how upset I am and they'll change. So it's all an aspect of, yes, emotions, but there's a piece in there of control and manipulation. What would work better though? You ready for this one? Instead of covering it up with anger, admit that you're hurt. Just say, instead of getting angry, how about I'm hurt? How about that hurt? How about, very simply, as Laura Doyle says, just say, ouch. That is much more effective, but you hear why people don't do that? Because what if on the off chance the person doubles down on it and gets nasty, even when you were vulnerable? I understand that. But we have to build that inner strength for vulnerability and for authenticity, for our relationship and also for ourselves. If we want to be a true person and real with ourselves through and through, the more real we get with ourselves, the more comfortable we'll get when people walk away from us or get upset with us or they reject us or whatever, if we know we're being true and living with integrity, right? So when you say ouch, instead of covering it with anger, right, you open up the door to vulnerability. By the way, especially for the ladies, this is true. If you actually it works for both, but when you are, that's more authentic also to really what you want to share. Person did something that upset you, or the person did something that caused you pain. The most authentic effect of that is ouch, right? And a lot of times, if you'll take that approach and you're present in the moment instead of turning around and getting defensive and acting with anger and all sorts of other attacks and manipulations, you'll find that again opens the door for relationship, for connection, for intimate emotional connection. Right? I'll give you another example. Another example is, imagine you have a couple that they've been married for a little while. And imagine maybe the guy, I don't know, they haven't been going on dates, like the way they used to before they were married. So you can have you can imagine a situation where maybe the gal would come to the guy and say, you never take me on dates anymore. You don't take me out anymore. So now, by the way, there might be some guys who say, oh, okay, fine, let's go out on a date. How's next Thursday? And to the extent that that's coming from a place of the guy is now taking the girl out, the husband is now taking the wife out because he wants to pacify her anger and because he wants to avoid the hell that he's going to have to pay or just the headache that he's going to have to endure if he doesn't take her out. So do you see how this isn't a relationship building activity? Do you see how he's pacifying? Actually, the truth is, even in that scenario, he's being emasculated, right? Because he's giving up his autonomy of whether or not he wants to choose to go out on the date, right? So you go down that path. If you're a gal who goes down that path, whether it be going out on dates or just a million other things, of taking away that guy's autonomy through manipulation. Now, by the way, it's half the guy's fault too, because he has to be assertive in those kind of situations and not allow himself to be manipulated and emasculated. So don't get me wrong, that's half on the guy as well. But the gal should also know that any manipulations is paid. The price is paid in intimate emotional connection in the relationship, right? That's where you pay the price. Any control and manipulation comes on the back of the relationship. So there's no, it's simply the science of emotions, if you could say such a thing. So while the lower side of that person who says, you never go out and you never take me on the date, and then he's like, oh, okay, let's go on the date. The lower side of the person who is maybe feeling rejected is that person, that side of the lower side is pacified in the moment, but the higher side really knows that the person didn't choose them in that moment. So what's the alternative to, you never take me out anymore? So that's one extreme. Now, the other extreme that some gals and guys do is not say anything for a really long time because the other person, quote unquote, should know, right? Also, not the healthiest approach. Sometimes they don't know, or sometimes just life happens and other things get in the way, and that's just a reality. What's the alternative? What's the healthy middle ground? Is be present in the moment with what you're feeling and share it authentically. That's it. Nothing less and nothing more. What do I mean by that? You ready? Here's what I mean. Imagine instead of, why don't you ever take me out on dates anymore? Imagine instead of that, the gal would turn to the guy and say, I would love to go on a date with you sometime this week. I would really love to go on a date with you. Do you hear how that is an expression in the moment? Do you hear that idea? Do you hear how much more welcoming that is? And the guy actually even feels wanted. Look at that. As opposed to, horse carriage driver or something, I don't know. Do you hear how that is expressive? Now, why don't people do that? Why do so many people not do that? Answer, because when that's putting yourself out vulnerably, and that means the way you feel about it is, I'm putting myself out there, and it could be that he'll receive it, but it could also be that he'll reject it and push it away and throw it away. And so what they do instead is they'll come out with in a way of anger or lunacy or manipulation or guilting or crying, whatever it might be, whatever that manipulation tool from the manipulation toolbox is, in order to twist the arm of the other person to get them to do, at least on the surface, to get them to do that thing that you want them to do. So on the surface, there's it pacifies that feeling of, I don't have a relationship, but deep down, you're actually ensuring that feeling and experience that you don't have the relationship, right? Because again, relationship can only be built with authentic sharing and vulnerability. And relationship is always two people coming together by way of them both choosing towards one another, which means they have a real capacity to not choose towards one another. They have the real capacity to say no, right? And so when we approach people in our lives, we want to give them that capacity to say no. Because then when they go ahead and say yes, that's a real yes. And everything else is fake anyway. Everything else is on the surface, and that builds entanglement. It builds unhealthy connection. It builds unhealthy attachment. And the good stuff, the intimate, charged, emotional potential for connection is just not happening, right? And so a person who lives that way, and if a guy and a gal have that dynamic in a marriage, that unhealthy dynamic in a marriage, for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, 20 years, so the gal could be getting all of these things that imagine the gal is doing the manipulation for the purpose of my example, because I was speaking before about emasculation. So the gal could be constantly getting the guy to do it, but meanwhile the guy is turning to a shell of himself, and also he's not acting like a male who's like choice oriented and direction oriented. He's giving up on that choice, giving up on that direction, because he knows he's going to have a hell to pay if he goes ahead and actually makes a choice different than what she wants. And then after a while, this erodes and corrodes the relationship. And the gal is disgusted with the guy too, even though he's doing the things that she wants. Why? Because he's not stepping into who he is supposed to be for her, which is strong, and which means strong and having his own space of really his choice, of making his choices, right? And so relationship can only be built with two people who are authentically sharing and choosing towards one another, which means they have real opportunity to choose the other way, right? So questions, thoughts, ideas. What do you guys have to say, by the way? Someone actually typed in a question there. Sorry, I missed it. Hold on a second. That still sounds passive. Unsure what you're referring to. Someone just write something again. No. Just looking through some different ideas here on this. I have a whole, about more or less 30 topics on this. So, but this is a good, here's another relatable idea also, similar to what we've been saying, right? To add to what we've been saying, you know, if you think about it, when we're talking about couplehood, right? When both people were single, you know, there wasn't this feeling, you know, there was a feeling of free of being, you know, of being able to be choice-based, right? You can do, you're capable of doing what you wanted to do, right? So of course, couplehood and marriage certainly and family comes with certain responsibilities for sure. But what I want to bring out here is that to still have the space for the other person to choose you, to still have that space for the relationship and the connection and the intimate emotional connection that we can build up is going to be built by that ability to choose, right? Without this, there isn't this relationship. It just leads to a sense of, you know, I don't know if the word is victimhood or resentment or what have you, but the point is to stay in a place of dignity within yourself, which means, yes, to share where you're at, who you are, how you feel, but not in a place of running after the other person, needing them to choose you or to want you, right? To be able to walk down that wedding canopy, to be standing under the wedding canopy, looking at a person, and you know that they are making the most selfish choice for themselves that they can ever be making, not coming from a place of guilt, not coming from a place of fears, what if this or what if that, what if this person says no, what if this person, you want that person to be making, you know, coming from a true, authentic place within themselves. And so if we can see that and feel that when it comes to marriage, when it comes to getting married, when it comes to someone choosing you and you choosing someone else. So now simply apply that to the rest of the relationship. Apply that to 10 years after marriage. Apply that to courtship at the beginning of dating and a relationship. To be real, to be authentic. And that opens the door to relationship. Can I guarantee you, if you're real and authentic and vulnerable, that other person is going to say yes to you? I cannot guarantee that. I do think it makes it more likely, though. Vulnerability, again, breeds relationship. Confidence breeds relationship and connection and desire. But I cannot guarantee it to you. But that's okay, because relationship is supposed to be coming from this place of choice, real choice, which means the person does have the capacity to say thanks but no thanks. And the more we open up that space and allow it to happen, come to it from that place within ourselves, that like, okay, I'm going to go to this date, have a good time, connect with this person, and we'll see where it goes in a healthy way, with healthy, having dignity for yourself and also being a person who authentically shares. So that's that, and praying and doing our best to look our best is all we can do. So someone says to me an interesting comment here. I rather spend time with jerks who pretend to be kind than to be jerks who are being themselves. Yes, but would you prefer that the jerk be themselves on the date, or would you prefer to go out with someone who's a jerk who pretends to be kind and then marry that jerk who pretends to be kind and then find out later that the jerk is actually a jerk? So now take that answer and apply it to everything else, not just jerks, but just all sorts of things. All right, my friends, I hope this is meaningful. I hope this is relevant. I hope it's helpful. I appreciate you joining me today, and I appreciate you joining me for this entire series. God willing, we'll pick up next week with something. I don't know what. We'll see. I wish you all a happy Chag Shavuot, and we should receive the Torah into our lives with love and respect. And yes, for the person who just asked me that, this is recorded. You can get it on the Lighthouse as a sound bit. It'll be on YouTube. It'll be on SoundCloud under the Lighthouse Project account. Well, you'll find it. Look at the blue logo. Beautiful blue logo, by the way. Anyway, my friends, have yourselves a great day, great Shabbat, and Chag Sameach. Be well.